Yo, what is going on, everyone? It's your boy Pup. We're back with the LPDL Season 2 draft notes. If you guys did enjoy the first week and all the battles and everything, be sure to leave a like, subscribe. We're going over everything that happened in last week's battles and what I think is going to go on in this week's. So make sure you go watch all the videos. All the coaches should be linked in the descriptions, and all the videos should be up by now. And if not, they're late, so it's up to them. But yeah, we can see the results from week 1 on our screen here. First of all, we had Matt losing a very close one to Jamal. That was a really fun battle. The sword stance toe-to-dial really went crazy. And then the APOM in the back was really able to, just keep everything alive with fake out and, take a lot of damage from Matt's team. It was really hard to switch into that Pokemon once the Duskull went down. Lux destroyed King. The Doduo just went absolutely insane. There's just no resist on King's side for that Pokemon. Sandile also had a great matchup in that battle. Taytaz took a 3-0 win over Bio. I think Taytaz's team is just great in general, and it seems like they did some stuff with Citadel. Bio just unfortunately did not have everything they needed. I did think Inkay was going to be really good in the battle, but they just did not have enough pieces. We had Tom getting a very close win over Pyro, who brought Choice Scarf Meryl that really brought them off guard. But Tom ended up clutching it out. I really thought the Litten was going to be good there, but they didn't end up bringing the Terrifier set that I thought. They didn't see that it went straight past that Gibble resist. And then, the Galarian Meowth looks really solid in that matchup as well. Fampi did a lot more work than I expected it to. I 6-0'd Cart. I got a crit with my Hisuian Growlithe, but Volby and that Pokemon put in a ton of work. We did have one drop, so we have a forfeit win for Vortex. Oh well, we got Fauster now in their place. We got Kung Fu 3-0 over Alistair. Shelder went crazy in this matchup, being able to, just be a Shell Smash sweeper is really nice versus, any team in general. And I feel like maybe the power level on Alistair's team is not that crazy. With Dreepy as your Terra Captain might be a little bit tough for you. And then we had a really fun game, CJ versus Tog, where CJ did end up bringing the Litleo, which I thought was great in this matchup. I did put in some work for them, but it wasn't that sort of like Moxie Trailblaze set that I thought they would bring. We did see the Wooper on the other side, so who knows if it would have been that good. But I feel like they just did a lot of work in general. They limited the Cranidos, which ended up being Terra Dragon. I think that thing was Choice Scarfed as well, which looked solid in the matchup. Able to get your webs up as well on CJ's side, and just able to clean the game up with the Elekid, which is really nice to see here. But now we're going to look at what we're doing for week 2. Starting off, is the wrong button? All right, we're starting off with Matt versus King. I think this is going to be a really solid matchup this week. Really fun one. King obviously has a Sun team and made a couple of changes to the team after I advised them a little bit. Try to get a little bit more of your hyper offense going. We got rid of the Hisuian Zora and then the Deerling, I think, at the bottom. I really wanted them to pick up Tyro, get some priority on your side, which is really nice. We saw how Cart used it in Season 1. And then the Alolan Diglett, I think, is really nice to just be able to have a very fast Stealth Rock setter on your team where you didn't really have the best hazards. It also is a Rock Resist. A lot, I guess at 4 times resist, which is a lot better than a Sandy Gas. But you add a couple Rock Resists on your team, just make it a little bit stronger in that regard. Doesn't take on ground types quite as well without your Deerling to also resist. But you're gonna have to offset that a little bit. Just make sure that they're not setting up Stealth Rocks versus you. But I think King looks pretty solid in this matchup with the Sun. If they're able to get it up, it looks really hard for Matt's team to be able to stop. I do think Diglett in this game is going to be great. Obviously looks great into the Sun team where you can trap the Vulpix. I do think Shed Shell looks like a great option on that Pokemon just so you can't get trapped forever. You can also trap stuff like the Alolan Diglett, which probably should be Focus Sash in this game along with many. Charmander, if they're not a resisting type, can just straight up die to Life Orb Diglett or like Choice Banded Diglett to Earthquake, which is pretty tough. So maybe like Terra Grass on that sort of set to be able to live that, but Diglett looks very solid. I also think Choice Scarf Diglett could be good here because with the speed tiers, a Bulbasaur that's max speed and boosted by the Sun is speed tying with a Jolly Choice Scarf Diglett. If they do run like a modest Bulbasaur, try to get extra damage out of that, then they can get swept by that Diglett, or just get cleaned up. But can be really nice because that Bulbasaur is unresistible on Matt's team. There's literally just no way to switch into that Pokemon. It's really tough. You might have to deal with it with something like the Pineco, have that sturdy click explosion on that Pokemon, try to take it out that way. You might be able to eat a hit with like a very specially defensive version of Duskull with an Eviolite, maybe be able to get a decent amount of damage off with that. Clicking, I don't know, Pain Split plus Shadow Sneak could be solid. You know, Poltergeist can also be really nice for you. I think on Matt's side, I mean, you just have to get your hazards up. The Glimmet is imperative to this game. You have to really not let King start off strong and be able to get up the Stealth Rock, especially. Being able to get up Spikes is really nice in this game to weaken that Bulbasaur, because that is the biggest threat for your team. You can't let Minccino tidy up, but you do have a Duskull that really doesn't let that Pokemon do anything, which I think is really solid here. Scraggy can get going. I mean, if it gets a Dragon Dance up, it's really hard for King's team to be able to, you know, switch in and destroy it, especially one-shot it. Is really hard for them, but they do have an Impidimp that can set up screens that makes it really hard to break through the Bulbasaur. So, I mean, if you get a +1 Scraggy, it's going to take at least 2 Pokemon to be able to take it out. So you can trade 2 for 1 or maybe even 3 for 1 like that, which I think is what Matt really wants to do in this game. I also think Drowsy has some merit in this game. I know Matt said that they're going to use it a couple times, that they're legally bound to use Drowsy a couple times this season. And I think this matchup is actually quite solid for it. Being able to spam knockoff versus this team is really nice. And being able to have some nice strong Psychic Stab against a Bulbasaur is really good as well. Doesn't really get destroyed by anything. Their dark types are not like super offensive, probably a lot more support in this matchup, so you don't mind it too much. So I don't think you have to worry about that. Blitzel, I'm not sure exactly if it wants to come to this matchup. It can be really solid if with like Sap Sipper plus any sort of Terra to try to resist a Bulbasaur. You know, like a Terra Poison to resist your Sludge Bomb. Anything like that can be a little bit solid to make sure that you're going to be able to knock that Pokemon out with like an Overheat or whatever Flame Charge that Pokemon gets. I think that could be an option for Matt's side there. But overall, I'm siding with King here. I think their team is super strong. I mean, just having stuff like that Dual Screens Impidimp is just going to make it really hard for Matt to stop the Sun in this matchup. And I think that's why King ultimately gets it done. By the way, I'm going to keep track of everyone who I think is going to win. And hopefully I will go, what is it, 8 for 8? I doubt that's going to happen, but I'm going to go for it this week. Next up, we have Taytaz versus Jamal. And I think this is a really tough matchup for Taytaz. It is my game of the week, but Taytaz just has a really hard time switching into basically everything on Jamal's side. Look at the speed tier disparity here. Basically everything on Taytaz's side is slower than like half of Jamal's team, with, you know, half of the Pokemon hitting that 17 or above speed tier, where Taytaz only has 3 Pokemon up there, and not all of them want to run max speed usually. So it's a little bit of a tough situation there, especially because the defense on Taytaz's team usually looks pretty solid, but not having reliable recovery versus this Apom that's just going to be able to click Fake Out versus your team is really annoying. And you just don't switch in well to basically anything on their side. I do think it's pretty nice to have like a water absorbed Pokemon versus Totodile so they can't spam. You know, obviously like Liquidation, Sheer Force, Life Orb boosted can be very scary. And you do have, you know, a Coughing that is able to take some hits as well if you are an Eviolite Pokemon there. But it's going to be hard to switch into the Totodile. I think the game basically, I mean, it's going to run through Stantler for one. I think like an Agility Calm Mindset looks really solid. Maybe you don't even need Agility, but being able to get past some Choice Scarfers like a potential Choice Scarf Crabrawler is really nice. I think you also might want to run like Covert Cloak on this. Make sure you don't get Fake Out and chipped down by the Apom. I think can be a really solid option for you. Just build yourself a little bit bulky. You don't even need that much speed on that Pokemon. And just hope that Jamal clicks Fake Out into you as you're getting yourself set up. I feel like that could be very solid. There's no Dark type on Jamal's team, since I don't think Cacnea is actually a Dark type, which is pretty solid. But looking at Jamal's side, they have a lot of counterplay. They do have a couple of new Pokemon on the team. They dropped Marini and Solosis for Slowpoke and Hisuian Zora, which I think makes this team a lot scarier. In this matchup specifically, I do think like a Life Orb Zora is insanely strong. Obviously, you can't lock yourself in with a Scarf or Specs to either Hyper Voice or Shadow Ball when there's a Drifloon and a Stantler on the other side, which I think always comes to this game. So you can't lock yourself in every single time. I mean, but you could still try if you really want. But I think it's strong in general. Really blows by a lot of the defense I feel like a Hyper Voice or a Shadow Ball, like Life Orb boosted, really can probably just two-shot a Fuecoco or a Coughing or even a Chinchou, unless they're like incredibly bulky on the specially defensive side. So it's a little bit tough for Taytaz in that regard. I think Jamal also, has merit with that Totodile. What kind of Terra type? It's really up to you. I could see something like Psychic and go for like Stab Psychic Fangs. It looks really strong. You can obviously go Life Orb, Cheer Force boosted against everything with that as well. So you're able to, have a stab option, hit everything on the team except for the Mastiff, which does Terra out of its typing. And it's really important for being able to break down that Coughing that can be really annoying if it's able to click Will-O-Wisp after living one attack from you. I can also see something like Ground could be solid to make sure that you don't get Thunder Waved by the Chinchou. Make sure you're able to click Earthquake into that. Pokemon could be solid. And I think in this match you have to run Dragon Dance. Last week we saw Swords Dance, which was a great option from them. But I think Dragon Dance makes a lot more sense into the speed disparity here. I think Brawler looks insanely good here, especially once you get rid of that Coughing. It looks really nice. But being able to, just Drain Punch versus a lot of the Pokemon on the team, be really annoying, I feel like is nice, and obviously are faster than basically everything. At worst case, you're speed tying with like a Drifloon that might want to switch into you, which you can just get a nice, little dark hit. Does this thing get knockoff? I think it probably does. Let's check this out really quick. Crab, I actually don't think it does. It actually does. Never mind. It gets knockoff, which is really great to spam in this matchup. I mean, if the Coughing wants to come in, if the Drifloon wants to come in, knock that off, get in a really good position. We're going to be able to take advantage of that later in the game. I also think that you probably bring Nose Pass in this game. Make sure that you don't get swept by having a sturdy Pokemon in the back. Against a couple of the threats like that Stantler, I think even Drifloon can be a huge setup threat like that. So Toddle we saw was pretty solid last week. So it can be good there. I mean, the 6 from Jamal, I mean, I feel like 5 are pretty obvious. Seeing the Apom, Totodile, Kerballer, Nose Pass, and the Hisuian Zorua, we can see one of any other Pokemon, and I think you have a really solid way to win this matchup. Taytaz is going to have going to need a lot of help in this, for sure. What can Mastiff really do versus them? I think it can be very solid, being able to, if it wants to Super Stab, go for Dark. Click like Choice Scarf Crunch can be really nice. You can't switch in because of the Stakeout ability, which I think is really solid. But Jamal, I mean, you just need to play a solid game in general. Just be able to click Fake Out with your Apom a decent bit. Don't get caught off guard by Taytaz. Make sure you always keep that sturdy Pokemon in the back with a Nose Pass. You should be able to win this game pretty handily, so I'm going to give it to Jamal here. For our third game of the week, we have Pyro versus Lux. Here, Lux had a very nice showing in week 1 against King. Pyro just fell short of Tom in a great matchup there. And I think this matchup is a lot harder for Pyro. Although I don't love their team, I think they had a winning matchup in week 1. This week is very different for them. I don't think Meryl's very good in this matchup at all. You have stuff like the Grievard that can take some hits decently well with that fluffy ability, so you're not really going to be able to break through that Pokemon without a Belly Drum. The Tentacool, if you run that thing physically defensive with an Eviolite, cannot be hit by it. The Dual Stab is very hard at all, or basically any coverage move that you can think of from that Meryl. You also have Snover, which kind of forces you to run Superpower, because with that Snow Boost, I mean, you're not really doing that much with a Liquidation, Aqua Jet. Even Play Rough isn't doing the greatest amount of damage. You also see stuff like Snubble that can click or can switch in, give and Intimidate. So it doesn't make Meryl look very solid in this matchup. I do think that Yanma is really good here, though. I think that if you get a couple speed boosts up, I mean, you never have to worry about Sticky Webs, you never have to worry about Choice Scarfers on Lux's side, and you have pretty solid stab options into this team. Being able to click any flying or bug move really just takes advantage of a lot of Lux's weaknesses. The Tentacruel is very specially defensive naturally. I think you do go special Yanma here, so you might need to get rid of that thing, or at least chip it down. Maybe some hazards in this game will be really solid for you. You hazard stack with like Gibble Spikes and Stealth Rocks. I can see being a nice win con in this game, but I think Yanma can definitely pull through for you. It's really your best Pokemon in this game by far. Nothing else really compares to it. Score Bunny's solid here. Obviously not that great into like a matchup with a Snubble. And Flash Fire or Houndour means you can't just spam moves. But I think like Choice Scarf with U-Turn always looks pretty solid. You know, being able to get a decent amount of damage and get some initiative into some of your more defensive Pokemon. I also think that the Alolan Sandshrew can be solid if you do force the Snover to come here. You can get that speed boost. I mean, it's also a rapid spinner if you are afraid of sticky webs, which I don't think you are too much because your main offensive threats are one, the Marill, which doesn't really need it when you have Aqua Jet. I mean, might need it if you are like some sort of belly drum set and trying not to lose a Snover or you know, anything else on the squad that can just, you know, easily one-shot you, Tentacruel or Tentacool, something like that. So I mean, sometimes you are worried about the webs, but if your game plan is to just win with the potential Yanma, or if you run heavy-duty boots potentially on the Marill, I could see as a decent option to try to deter that. Even Choice Scarf again this week. You don't really mind too much. It can be a very nice offensive threat in this game, having a great stab typing into this team. And you know, if you get a Sword Stance up, Triple Axle is incredibly hard to switch into, which I think is good. Gible, I think, should just be a spike setter here. There's not great removal, or I mean, there's like a rapid spinning Tentacruel or Tentacool, but not super easy Pokemon to fit rapid spin on. And it can be spin blocked by the Poltergeist, which is really the reason why you should have that Pokemon on Pyro's team. So you might be able to spin block, maybe be able to get yourself in decent positions with that, try to, you know, leverage your Yanma in this matchup. I don't think any of the other Pokemon are necessarily that great here. Maybe, you know, you run Krogunk with a lot of priority, like a Vacuum Wave, to try to deal with Sandile that kind of blows through your team. Maybe Poochyena can come if you want as your Terra Captain, but I don't think it's necessarily that good in this game. Looks like it's kind of forced into a Choice Scarf role, so it doesn't just get one shot by literally any Pokemon that is faster than it. Lux's side, I think you have a solid matchup here, like I've said. Meditite looks really nice. Your speed isn't the best, but that's why you have Sticky Webs on the squad. Still does outrun a good portion of Pyro's team. Actually, it outruns basically everything except for the Yanma, which you're never going to outrun with webs. And then the Scorbunny, which I think could be Choice Scarf to get around the webs. I mean, always be faster than that Meditite anyways, or Boots can be a solid option for that in general. Everything else you outspeed and you kind of destroy. Just be able to click like Zen Headbutts plus Close Combat in this matchup looks really solid. Some sort of like dark coverage move to hit Poltergeist plus the Galarian Slowpoke. I think you could run something like Protective Pads in this matchup so you don't get staticked by the Tadbulb, you don't get rough skinned by that Gible. I think could be solid options for your items here. Even like a Focus Sash I could see being very solid because you get a lot of merit out of this Pokemon. You also have Tentacool, has to come. We already talked about it being insanely good defensively, but also being a nice spinner because Pyro's real like best way to win this game is with hazards. I think Sandile is very solid here. Being able, like, once that Yanma's gone, there's no great switch into a Choice Scarf, or even, you know, you don't even need the Choice Scarf, really, but any sort of Earthquake. And you do have Crunch, so I mean, you don't even run yourself Choice, you run yourself like Life Orb, and you just spam those moves. Maybe bait the Yanma in early, which can be nice if you're able to get a free Stealth Rocks layer up with that Pokemon. Snubble's also just insanely good here. Being able to get that Intimidate off versus a very physically offensive team is really nice. Surskit, you have the webs. Doduo put in a ton of work last week. I think it can do the same thing again. If you do run into like very physically defensive Eviolite, Gible, it's not that easy, or I mean potentially the Alolan Sandshrew, but I'm sure Doduo gets like Jump Kick, which should be able to take that Pokemon out. Just have to worry about an Ice Shard. I also think Houndour is pretty solid in the matchup. Just having a great offensive typing versus basically everything on Pyro's squad. What sort of Terra might we see here? It's really interesting. What do you want to hit? You do already have Sludge Bomb plus any fire move plus like a dark move to be able to hit basically everything on the squad. You might want to try to hit the Gible a little bit harder and go Terra Ice or Terra Fairy. Even could be solid defensively. Even Terra Dragon on, you know, be able to always eat up an Aqua Jet from like a Choice Band and Marill, I think can be a pretty solid option for you in this game. Talked about Snover potentially being solid here, but I don't know if you want to give the snow to that Sandshrew. That can be scary for you. Grievard is a solid defensive pivot into a lot of the Pokemon. You have Fluffy, so you have double physical defense versus everything, or I guess double versus all contact moves besides fire moves. which is really nice if you are worried about like a Krogunk, if you are worried about like Meryl destroying you. And Beldum, I don't think can come to this game. I don't think it's great here. But overall, I mean, this matchup looks very much in favor of Lux, and I'd be a little bit surprised if they didn't win it. If Pyro really wants to be serious about this, he's got to win with that Yanma and maybe make some changes to this team after the fact. Next up, we have my matchup versus Bio, which is a rematch of the PPDL Season 1 Finals. I think this is going to be a really solid matchup. And this season, we see Bio having the Delibird, not me. Insanely strong Pokemon here with a great speed tier versus my team. And it's just very, very strong with Hustle. You don't even have to run Hustle if you don't want. I feel like it can be solid. And to me, with just having a lot of great coverage options, being able to have like Drill Run for my Growlithe, and just being able to click Brave Bird plus Triple Axle versus my team is really hard to switch into. But luckily, we do have a Bronzor for that, which is what I'm hoping is going to be able to take care of that Pokemon, but we'll really see later. I think their Trapinch is pretty solid here. Being able to easily take like a, choice banded even head smash from my Growlithe that put in so much work in week 1, and just being able to take that Pokemon out of the game immediately is really nice. It means I can never really bring that Growlithe and be super comfortable with it. I would have to bring like Shed Shell, which really takes away from obviously like being choice banded or being choice scarfed, which is nice to threaten like the Voltorb and that Delibird. I think looking at Bio side real quick, having that speed tier with the Voltorb at 20, having the 18 with Delibird is really solid here. The Voltorb is faster than everything on my side. It doesn't have the best coverage into Pokemon like Toedscool, which is just very specially defensive in general. So, I mean, obviously a ground type as well. So you're not going to take anything from electric moves. Even like a Raw Terra Blast isn't going to be doing too much. Maybe we see Foul Play from them. Maybe we also see Taunt if they do want to bring it in the matchup. But if they don't, then I have the faster Pokemon on the squad. I also think Choice Scarfers are, very obvious from Bio's side. We could see something like a Choice Scarf Delibird even be pretty solid versus my team. Just being able to click like Brave Bird or Triple Axle is solid versus me. And then like talking about that speed, Quaxley can set up with a Rapid Spin, getting that speed, or just be Choice Scarf. And then they have Dragon Dance Larvitar, which is a huge threat into my team. I don't have a Pokemon that can really eat a hit at +1 besides potentially a very defensive Shellos, or depending on Terra, I could run the chest form of Gimmighoul. Obviously cannot run Eviolite on that, but can Terra it to try to live any one hit from that Pokemon. This is a big threat for me to deal with. I also think another threat is the Fungus. Being able to click Spore versus my team is pretty solid. My grass type is the Toedscool. Doesn't really want to switch into Sludge Bomb, especially if they have the Voltorb on their squad, to be able to take advantage of that once I get chipped down. So, I mean, it's a solid Pokemon in the matchup. I also think the last 4 on their team are really solid as well. Maybe not so much Teddiursa, doesn't click buttons as much versus me, but they have Larvitar that can be decently defensive. Maybe not so much into the matchup with the Dewpider and the Hisuian Growlithe. Inkay is always solid, like Choice Scarf Superpower looks very solid into me. Is hard to revenge kill. I can't take advantage of that if I have like a Scarf Gothita or something like that. They can just freely come in, click Superpower or Knock Off versus me if I do lock into Psychic. And the Varoom can also be very good. I don't have a grounded Poison type on my squad, so if they want to bring Toxic Spikes, that can be very detrimental. I do have counterplay to a lot of this though. I have a lot of fast Pokemon. Meowth plus a Volbeat are faster than everything except for Voltorb, which is not super strong. Like we talked about, I do have the Toedscool that very well takes care of that defensively. So the combination of those two Pokemon is really strong. I can also set up webs if I want. It's not going to affect the Delibird, but it affects their Choice Scarfers and it affects that Voltorb if they're not running heavy-duty boots, which is definitely an option for them. But it can be solid for me in the matchup to deter a lot of those things. But if they have Contrary, obviously, on their Inkay, then they're going to get +1 speed. They don't even need to run a Choice Scarf, and it can just blow by me, which is very scary. I'm assuming Growlithe, talked about it a little bit. It's hard for me to be able to pick up a KO with that Pokemon when I can just easily get revenge killed by Trapinch. That's tough. Gothita is really nice to be able to trap stuff like Fungus. We might see a Shed Shell from that Pokemon, since it is pretty nice on their squad. Being able to get like a free swap into a Choice Scarf Inkay can be very solid for their team. We have a Growl or a Meowth. Didn't bring it week 1, but it looks very solid in this week. Being able to just click like Technician Fake Out and then like Covet and stuff I can be even like normal gem and then be able to steal an item with covet can be solid here. If I am able to like steal an Eviolite from a Pokemon like a Fungus, if I'm able to steal anything from their squad, it can be really nice. Shellos is a great defensive piece that water typing is really nice for me, and not being able to get knocked off, maybe not the most important in this matchup where there's only a couple knockoff users, but it can be a nice switch in to that Inkay that is scary for me. Gimme Ghoul, we can just, I mean, kind of spam attacks versus them. What is their switch into like a Terraghost Shadow Ball, really? They have the Teddiursa, obviously, but I don't think it looks very solid in this matchup in general. They might end up bringing it and surprising me, but Gimme Ghoul can be very solid. Volbeat put in a ton of work in week 1. I'm hoping that it can continue that in week 2. Has great coverage versus the squad, and I'm bringing a really fun set that I hope you guys are super excited for. You're going to see it in the matchup on Friday, and you guys are going to be blown away for sure. Toadschool, we talked about its defensive capabilities are really nice. Bronzor obviously has great defensive capabilities in this game as well. Being able to be levitate and not getting destroyed by that Trapinch is really nice. First impression or crunch do a lot of damage from that 100 base attack though. But being able to eat some hits from the Delibird is also really important for my team. Without that Pokemon, I kind of just lose the game on the spot to Delibird if I do not have like fast Scarfers. And then Magikarp, not going to come to this game. It will probably have its time to shine this season, but not versus this team for sure. With the Fungus, I can't do anything. I mean, I guess it's like Tackle and Flail. When is it really going to have a good game? It's definitely not. But yeah, I mean, I think the matchup does favor Bio, and I hate to root against myself, especially after a 6-0 for me. Yeah, let's give me myself. I'm going to win this game. I trust in the process. I know Bio wants revenge after what happened in finals last season, but I think I'm going to take it home in this one. Next up, we have another match with the Vortex and Tom. Vortex wasn't able to get their match out last week because they had a forfeit against Jacob, which is totally fine, but we haven't seen how they're able to put this team together, which I think is pretty interesting. Tom, on the other hand, had a great win against Pyro. Maybe not the scariest team to face off against, but I didn't think they had a great matchup into it. And I think Misdreavus is pretty solid again this week. Looks very good to just be able to spam Shadow Ball versus this team. They have one good resist, which is the Stunky. They do have bulletproof Chespin, so you cannot like choice scarf yourself into that, but you do have solid coverage for stuff on their team. No pursuit or anything, since this is Scarlet Violet, so you can't get trapped. But it is incredibly hard for you to switch into that Stunky if it wants to click a knockoff. Sucker Punch is also scary versus you because it doesn't have to be faster to be able to actually outrun you and destroy you in one shot. I think the Grimer is really good in this game. It can't absorb knockoff, which is really tough for you, but it can do a lot to the opposing team. Vortex's team really relies on that Stunky and the Timber, especially the Timber, like those Eviolite Pokemon, bulky offensive things. And if you get a knockoff on those, you are looking like you're in a much better position, in my opinion. And I think that you can definitely run the game through this Pokemon. It has great coverage versus them as well. I mean, you can click stuff like Shadow Sneak if you want some priority. You can also like very easily take on stuff like Wattrel, click Ice Punch versus that Pokemon. Ice Punch plus Shadow Sneak. I mean, probably is doing way too much versus that. Also does a ton to the Chespin, everything like that. So it's really hard for them to switch into this guy defensively. On Tom's side, I also think Mankey is good in this matchup. It's always a nice choice scarfer. You don't even need to run it that way this week, but you know, if you want to outrun the Stunky, make sure you're outrunning Wattrel or at least forcing a speed tie versus choice scarf. You might want to run that. Because you can basically spam fighting moves versus this team. There's no real switching at all. I mean, the only resist I see is a Wattrel, which really does not want to take close combat from that Pokemon. I guess you have Tarantula as well if they do want to bring the webs, which can be an issue for Tom's team. Their hazard removal is the Bergmite. Phanpy does not get it, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I think on Vortex's side, you might just have to bring those webs. Looks pretty good to stop a Mankey. Make sure that, you know, nothing can really like sweep versus you as well. Your speed tiers aren't the best, where Tom has 3 Pokemon or 4 Pokemon that are 17 or higher, whereas Vortex only has 2, which is a little bit tough for you. Maybe Vortex just plays it a little bit more defensively, but I could also see something like Shell Smash Squirtle going crazy versus this team. If you just put on like Surf plus Ice Beam, it really does so much versus Tom's team. You might need a little bit of hazard support as well. For you to really be able to do that much, you need to be able to knock out the Grimer, which I'm not sure if you can do at +2, even if you have some hazards with you. But I mean, you have the Chespin on your squad, which is really good at setting up those hazards, and it's going to be very, very hard for Tom to get rid of them when that Bergmite is the only answer. On Tom's team, their Terra captain is Litten, which I think is solid in the matchup. Maybe doesn't have as polarizing of a matchup as they did last week, where I thought that Terrafire Overheat was really solid. Although it can do a ton of work again here, I feel like if there's a defensive Squirtle, it might be able to take that Pokemon on decently well. But it's nice to, have that Intimidator in the back for stuff like Stunky, for stuff like the Timber. Can be very solid for you. Make sure that those Pokemon don't just get out of hand, which is an important role to have on that guy. I also think that Vortex, they have the Rhyhorn as their Terra captain, and that Pokemon looks crazy here. I think Rock Polish set can be very solid. You do have to worry about like Fampi with Sturdy and Bergmite all doing the same sort of stuff. But I think that you can do a lot of damage with this Pokemon. It has a very good base attack, so you just get a Rock Polish up and you're faster than everything on Tom's team. Or even under a Sticky Web, it can be really solid in that same regard. Just being able to click Earthquake versus most of the stuff on Tom's team. I don't know what kind of Terra you exactly want to be. I could see some sort of Terra to hit Turtwig because that looks like a good defensive piece in this matchup, trying to block the Rhyhorn, trying to block, Chespin, anything that wants to do, trying to block the Squirtle. So, you could go like Terra Fire, do anything like that makes you weak to the Corphish. Hey, you could go like something like Terra Ice, which makes you weaker to the Mankey, but super effective against that guy, being able to hit the Fampi a little bit better. So we'll see what they end up bringing in that regard. I do think that Vortex just has the edge in this matchup. The webs here, I think, really push it over the edge. Obviously, Misdreavus has Levitate, so it's not going to get affected. But with the other Pokemon on your squad really being reliant on those speed tiers, I think that Bergmite is not really going to be the best spinner in the matchup, and I think that Vortex is going to be able to take this one with its strong, bulky offense and those sticky webs. The next matchup we have for today is Kung Fu versus Cart. I think that Cart has a really good matchup here, despite getting kind of smoked by me last week. I think they have a really solid matchup with Sableye. I mean, it just looks great. I think a bulk up Drain Punch like knockoff recover set looks insane versus Kung Fu. The only real Pokemon that doesn't care about that set is the Shelder, that can probably just like Shell Smash in its face, but it has a horrible matchup into Grookey with Grassy Glide. After one Shell Smash, I mean, you're just getting destroyed by it anyways. Even though you have like massive physical defense, I think that set for Sableye just, wins the game on the spot. There's really nothing that you can do about it if you get a couple bulk up set up. And you have super easy, reliable recovery on that Pokemon. Not exactly sure what item you would want to go on with that guy, but it still looks insane here, and it's just impossible for Kung Fu to counter. We talked about Grookey being great, especially for the Shelder. You have to keep that Pokemon alive just so you don't get 6-0'd swept, because if they do get a Shell Smash up, it is very hard. But you also need to make sure that you're living an Ice Shard from that Pokemon, because at +2, they will obviously be faster with their priority, and you just want to make sure that you don't die to that. So if they get like 2 Shell Smashes up, that can be scary for you, but hopefully won't be the end of the world for Cart. I think Strudel is solid in this matchup. It doesn't hit the Pawniard very hard unless you're going something like Power Herb Dig, which can be solid in the matchup. It hits stuff like the Salandit as well, should be able to one-shot that. But if you're going to be, Grassy Seed or, anything like Swords Dance set in general, maybe, you could do Power Herb Dig. Actually could be pretty solid because you have a decent speed tier off the bat. So I could actually see that being a solid set for them. Numel in this game, I don't think is quite as good because of that Shelder. Really, it should be able to do a lot of damage no matter what with that 4x weakness. And the Hippo, you're really not doing any damage to that Pokemon anyways. So I don't think Numel's very good, but Joltik is for sure. You basically can just spam Thunders versus this squad. They do have the Hippo, which is a little bit annoying for you, but not the end of the world. I do think you have grass coverage. If not, you can go Grass Terra and click like Energy Ball, which I think you have, but if not, like Terra Blast is totally fine in this game. You have Bug Buzz to hit the Sprigatito. Obviously it's a speed tie, so it is what it is on that regard, but everything else that you're outspeeding, you just destroy. You really put that stuff away, and it looks pretty solid in this matchup. I think that the rest of your Pokemon, you choose whatever you want really here. Nothing else looks insane in the matchup, in my opinion. I feel like just the combination of Grookey plus Sableye kind of wins you this game very easily. Looking at Kung Fu side, pretty sure that Bagon should be the Terra Captain instead of Shuppet, but it is what it is. Mienfoo is solid here. Being able to click knockoff for free against Kart's team is nice. I feel like an Eevee like Grookey might come, which is kind of important to be able to knock off. Try to chip it down into range of like +2 Ice Shard from Shelter in the late game. I think Pawniard is also quite solid in the matchup. You probably are just like setting up Stealth Rocks, getting T-Waves off, maybe just like clicking Iron Head plus Sucker Punch, which I think is pretty solid. I mean, the way that you're going to have to take care of the Sableye in this matchup is either you're going to be one-shotting it with something that's like insanely choice banded, very strong a Life Orb, something like that can just hit it super hard. You don't have super effective moves on your team unless you have like Terra Fairy, which is pretty tough for you. I guess you have the Play Rough from Sprigatito, which can be solid, but I think like T-Waving from Pawniard might be really nice. You have to bring Shelter in this game. It wins if you get to +2 and Grookey is gone or in Ice Shard range. So you just have to bring it and just try to be able to sweep with it. I guess there are some potential like Choice Scarf Pokemon or even the what is that? The Shroodle that can get faster than it with its Unburden boost. So it is a little bit scary in that regard. So, you know, you might not just straight up win at +2, but it does have the potential to do that depending on what is on Kart's side at that point. Sprigatito, I think, is necessary in this matchup. Being the only Pokemon that gets fairy coverage on your team, being able to click that into the Sableye is really important. Those Protean boosted Play Roughs are actually very strong versus Kart's team. And, you know, probably not like Choice Band or anything like that, because you want to have coverage for the rest of their team, but they don't switch into Sprigatito very well at all. I also think another way that they can deal with Sableye is with the Salandit. Trying to get a Toxic off on it, or even setting up T-Spikes can be solid in the matchup. They do have a couple Defoggers on Kart's side, and obviously the Shroodle, which is a grounded poison type. But if you're going to be able to get like a poison off on the Grookey, on that Sableye, it can be really nice. Not doing very much compared to like a normal draft. So Little Cup, it's not quite as good, but it is actually still like good in the matchup. I do think that Toxic Spikes can be really important here. I think Hippo, probably not the best Pokemon in the matchup, just makes you more Grookey weak. But if you are worried about like Shroodle being, you know, going crazy or anything, you can bring like very defensive sets. It also has that sort of chip damage with Sandstorm, which kind of hurts your team, but can be nice as well. Down the board, I think Bagon is also really solid here. You kind of have to bring it as a Dragon Dance Pokemon. I mean, maybe something else, some other set can be really solid for you. And like I said, I'm pretty sure this guy is the Terra Captain, right? Let me just check it out. Let's see, where is that? Yeah, Bagon is the Terra Captain. So, I mean, you probably see Terra Fairy on this Pokemon, so you're going to be able to just not straight up lose to the Sableye. I could also see that Pokemon being a special attacker, which I think could be solid here. You are afraid of like Will-O-Wisp from the Sableye. I also think Bulk Up is their best set in general. So if you are special, you're getting past those boosts, getting past the Will-O-Wisp, and kind of puts you in a better spot. But if you want to, you know, bring some sort of Dragon Dance set, bring something else, I can totally see that being solid in the matchup as well. And I think Swablu is probably pretty important in this matchup as well. Being a decent, not like great, but decent switch into the Grookey, which is a huge threat to the team. I mean, Grassy Glide kind of destroys everything besides like the Pawniard, which it has some sort of fighting coverage for sure. So you definitely probably want to bring this very defensive Swablu. You can click Roost with this Pokemon. You can also defog if you do see like hazards come up, because, you know, Stealth Rocks from Kart's side, you know, can be very annoying with all that chip damage that you're going to see, making sure that, you know, you don't get destroyed. But really the game plan for Kung Fu is trying to get that Grookey into Ice Shard range, being able to destroy that Pokemon and try to clean up with the Shelter. I do think you have a lot of solid options for offense on this team, but I think Kart's just top two absolutely destroy Kung Fu's team. I think that's why Kart is going to win this game, get a nice comeback after a 6-0 loss last week. I know Kung Fu is coming off of a 3-0 win, I'm pretty sure, but I think that Kart is going to take this one with just a slight edge. Next up, we have the match between that one guy and Fauster. Fauster just took over for Jacob's team, didn't decide to make any changes, which I think is solid. It's a good team in general, but does have a kind of tough matchup. Does not switch into the Cranidos very well, especially being a Terra Captain. I think Terra Grass for that one guy looks incredible here. You really want to be able to make sure that you're going to be able to attack that Mudbray, because it can switch into head smashes. It's that stamina boost and is a little bit annoying. So I think you go Terra Grass, Trailblaze, maybe even Terra Blast on your set should be able to do a lot of damage to that guy. It also is very important to be able to be immune from like the Spore from Shroomish. I could see like Choice Scarf Spore or even Sash with Spore being solid from Fauster's side. I also think that's important to be immune to Stun Spore from the Prankster, Whimsicott, or Cottony, I guess. I think that that's going to be really important to just make sure you keep your win con alive. It's not going to be one-shotting everything on Fauster's team, but you know, if you do get that speed boost, if you have like a life orb on this Pokemon, it's going to be impossible to switch into, and it has a lot of great coverage options. I mean, but you can just click Head Smash plus Trailblaze plus, you know, some sort of coverage for Makihita, what, like Psychic Fangs or whatever else you have, and you're looking pretty in this matchup. I also think that Volibee is pretty solid here. It's a nice Pokemon. I think if you get a weak armor boost off in this game, you can just straight up win. I think its special variant is a little bit better than physical just because that Mudbray, but if you do want to overload that and just click knockoff versus their team, I think physical could be great as well. But if you click Nasty Plot, I mean, it's just incredibly hard for anyone to switch into you. They have so many Pokemon on their squad that's just weak to Dark Pulse or Air Slash from that Pokemon. I don't think you need really any other coverage. You just run like Roost, Nasty Plot, Dark Pulse, Air Slash, and you can pretty easily take down Fauster's team. I do think the one thing that can stop it is like a very specially defensive Munchlax, just because it is special defensive in general and has a ton of HP, so it's a little bit harder to take that Pokemon out. But if you're able to get off an Eviolite on that guy, or just get some extra chip damage on it, then it shouldn't be too big of a deal. Again, on that one guy's side, I think a couple other good Pokemon in the matchup. I think Ekans is actually decent. I think that it can do a lot in here. Just setting up T-Spikes can be really nice. There's no grounded poison on Fauster's side, so being able to get that off is really nice. And I think it's just a solid choice scarfer in the matchup. Obviously, like, you're gonna want to overload that Mudbray or force it to switch in. If you're ever able to get like a Poison Jab poison on that Pokemon, then it makes everything on your squad look so much better in this game. It also, you know, has that Intimidate, so you're not so worried about like physical Zora. You're not so worried about Jangmo sweeping you, not so worried about the Makuhita, Munchlax, etc., etc. You also have the potential for sticky webs in this matchup with the Grubbin. I don't think it's quite near as good as the potential Trailblaze set, because they do have Ghastly that is, you know, levitating, so it's not going to get affected. You really want to make sure you're going to be able to outrun that guy because he does a lot of damage. The Ghastly is very strong into you. But if you want to run it more defensively with, and do your sticky webs, I think Aurora Veil with the Alolan Vulpix is very solid here. Gives you a lot more setup opportunity with like that Volibee that we talked about earlier, with maybe the Flittle down the board. I think can be really good and has a solid offensive profile into this matchup. Being able to spam Blizzard is really strong. They do have a couple of resists, the Munchlax being the most important one. But you do also have stuff like Moonblast. You can Baton Pass out if you want as well to get some momentum. And then Flittle, I think, is really great in the matchup as well. Being able to just like, you know, I think Substitute is probably your best bet. Substitute plus Calm Mind. And then you run Stored Power. They do have the Zora that hopefully will tear out of Dark, so you don't need to put some coverage on. But I think, you know, if you do add some coverage, it makes you a little bit safer in this matchup. I do think Zora is going to be physical here, so you probably want to go like Substitute to get around Sucker Punch, just because that's the only real way for Fauster to take care of you if you get really fast, besides just living that with like a Munchlax, which, I mean, if you run all these specially offensive Pokemon, then you're really going to overload that Munchlax and it's not going to be able to do too much versus you. On Fauster's side, you do have the speed on your side here. You're probably not bringing like the Poliwag, but being able to have the Ghastly that outruns everything, except for speed tying with the Flittle before they get a boost, is really solid here. It has a great offensive typing and, you know, coverage for this whole team. You do just click Shadow Ball, and there's one immunity being Iggly buff, which just gets destroyed by like a Sludge Bomb. You do have, you know, a couple of other like potential defensive options on that one guy's team. You can go like a defensive Magnemite, something like that, but you really don't want to take hits from this guy. And it doesn't activate weak armor on Volibee, which is really nice. So you're just able to spam Shadow Ball plus Sludge Bomb versus this team, and it looks really strong. Mudbray is just important to have as a defensive piece, really stopping all those physical threats on that one guy's side, and mostly the Cranidos. You kind of just have to bring it for that Pokemon in general. You have the Zorua here, which I think is a solid Terra Captain in this matchup. I think it can actually go crazy. It depends on what kind of Terra type that you want to bring here. There are a lot of options. If you're most worried about like Magnemite or something, which I don't think is that important, you can bring like a ground fighting fire sort of thing, which also can help you, you know, make sure that you're able to one-shot Grubbin, try to not get webs on your side. But I do think like even Terra Dark looks solid. Being able to click those stab boosted sucker punches can be really good if something like the Cranidos gets out of hand. The Flittle, obviously, and it keeps the Flittle from really sweeping you that easily because it doesn't have any good coverage. I think its best thing is like 40 base power Disarming Voice, which is super effective against you, but not doing that much damage. I think Makuhita is good here. Obviously, having the double priority with Fake Out Bullet Punch is really strong. And if that Cranidos decides to be Terra Rock this week, then you don't have to worry about that as much with Bullet Punch on their squad. You do worry a little bit about Bramblin, but you should be able to, I think you have Knockoff, you have some other sort of coverage that you can run on that guy to be good. And then I think Munchlax is the last Pokemon that you absolutely have to have on this team. It's just amazing defensively into a lot of the special offense that one guy has this week. I think you probably bring either like some Oranberry Recycle set, or I think even like Rest can be solid for you in this matchup if you want long-term, just like set up your curses, get very, very bulky, and you can very easily win in that way. If you do end up getting, a couple curses up, are very specially defensive. And there's really nothing on that one guy's side that stops you. I think like the Rest is just a little bit better in this matchup because that Ekans setting up T-Spikes is very scary for you. And then, it's a toss-up between everything else that you want to bring on your squad. I think Cyndaquil has some merit. Choice Scarf Eruption looks really solid when the Wooper is like your best switch-in, which I don't think is very good in general. I don't think it's that great into the double grass type matchup as well, especially like Ghastly has Energy Ball. Should be able to take care of that Pokemon as well. But I could also see you bringing either Shroomish or the Cottony. I think Prankster Sunspore versus that one guy's team is pretty solid. The Volibee can be Overcoat to be able to deal with that, so you might have to scout that out. Same with the Spore from the Shroomish, but I think like Choice Scarf Shroomish or Focus Sash Shroomish probably gives you your best bet of being able to get a free Sleep Off, and then potentially going out to your Munchlax to get some free setup can be a way to win this for Fauster. I do think that one guy just has a little bit too much offense on this side. I think Cranidos looks a little bit too unstoppable. I also think that Flittle is very solid in this game, especially once you get rid of the Zora or it's not Terra Dark. So I think that one guy is going to be able to take it home this week, but I think it's going to be a really close matchup. I think that Fauster is going to make it super close with a lot of strong offense from their side. And last but not least, we have the matchup between CJ and Alistar. I think that this matchup is really even. It's really hard to see who's going to win here. But there are a lot of fun options from each side. We'll start off with CJ here. The Rufflet being incredibly good versus Alistar's team. I think you go like a bulk up sort of set. Bulk up Roost. You have Brave Bird or like Aerial Ace if you're running Hustle. I think is honestly probably your better option, which is just great. Maybe like some sort of fighting move, close combat to try to hit the Dunsparce, to try to take that thing out, which should, probably drop at +1 with Hustle boosted close combat. I think is really solid. And it has a decent speed tier, especially if you set up sticky webs, but they're not that great in this game when Alistar has a Snivy on their squad. The Snivy looks insane into CJ's team, especially when you see that Skrelp is not a poison dragon type like Dragalge, it's poison water. So it's taking the neutral hit. Your best resist is actually Sawaddle, which we have seen as a defensive Pokemon in this game and can be your way to set up webs and not get so punished for it. But if that Pokemon goes down, if there's sticky webs up on CJ's side of the field, I think Snivy really just has a field day versus this team. At +2, +4, +6 even. It just destroys everything that CJ has. And I do think that you set up Stealth Rocks easily in this game. I think Dunsparce is probably your Stealth Rock setter. And it's not the easiest way to keep it up because they do have a nice spinner in Sandshrew. But if you bring out the the Snivy, if you're Choice Scarfed or not, versus that Pokemon, you basically just claim a free KO. You set up your Stealth Rocks, you double out, and you're just in a great spot. You also do have spin blockers with Dreepy. Not being the best Terra Captain in this matchup, but can be a nice ghost type for you. Terra Ghost, Terra Blast is not too terrible in CJ. But Alistar, you also have a Golett here, which I think is a solid option, a second Stealth Rocker, if you want to have that on your squad. And I think it's going to be really solid here. I'm going back to CJ's team. Elekid is insane in this matchup. Naturally outspeeds everything on Alistar's team. They do have a little bit of priority. Fake out on the Meowth. I'm pretty sure Froakie gets it as well. If not, we see a lot of Choice Scarfers probably from Alistar's side anyways. They also have Gale Wings on the Fletchling if you want to be able to use that offensively. But you run this thing very physical. You just click Ice Punch basically versus everything on Alistar's team. You also have Knockoff, which I think is really solid. You can run Volt Switch on the squad as well, and then like Thunder Punch even, and that is absolutely destroying their team. It's really hard to be able to switch into that, and it's hard for Alistar to be able to one-shot that. Your best option for that is Gullet, and everything else I don't think can one-shot an Eviolite Elekid. I think it just looks too solid offensively in the matchup to be able to be taken advantage of. CJ also has a Sandshrew, which is your spinner, which is very important here. I mean, I feel like the hazard game from Alistar kind of dismantles CJ's team, but it's not easy to spin. You can like predict and click Knockoff into the swaps to Dreepy or Gullet. Try to get those spins off that way, you know, by punishing those switch-ins, but it's not easy for you. I also think the Axew can be really solid here. It's really good to, you know, make sure that they can't really run a Choice Scarf Snivy or anything, because it has to run Protect when there's first impression on the board there, which is really scary. Definitely, like, you can even run like Terra Bug, which should do a ton of damage even on switch-ins. I mean, there's nothing that really wants to take a Terra Bug first impression from a very strong Axew, especially if you're like Life Orb boosted or anything like that. It's incredibly hard to switch into that. I don't think the Buizel is that strong in this matchup, but we talked about Sawaddle being very good here as a defensive check to the Snivy. If you want to set up your webs, which I think are solid in the matchup, making sure that you don't get destroyed by like Choice Scarfers, because like Choice Scarf Gullet outruns your Elekid, can be a real pain for you to deal with. It is a little bit tough in that regard. Another Pokemon that can be solid on your team, I think, is Litleo. And we talked about it being solid last week, and it was pretty decent, not in the exact spread that I thought it would be. But it has a great speed tier 17, being able to speed tie with most of Alistar's team, or just being able to straight up outrun it. I think Moxie this week looks great. You're just able to, you know, click a Flame Charge, get yourself a speed boost against a couple of those Fire Weak Pokemon on their squad, and you just go ham. I mean, you basically just click Flare Blitz versus their team, and there's no great switch in. Your two Resist to Fire are very offensive and do not want to take the hit at all. So I think that Litleo actually can go pretty crazy in this matchup. If you do want another option from those lower tiers, I think Chingling can be solid as well. Being able to click like dual screens, T-Wave, I think it has Healing Wish as well, trying to get either your Elekid back up where it's really important in this game, or giving yourself an opportunity to set up and sweep with a Rufflet, I think can be very solid here. Going back to Alistar's team, I think Torchic with that speed boost can be really nice. Being able to not really care about the sticky webs as much, or Choice Scarfers on CJ's team. If you get a Swords Dance up with that guy, or if you like Focus Energy, Scope Lens plus Overheat, I think can be insane versus CJ's team. I think that's actually a pretty heat set. Being able to get all those crits, it basically can one-shot everything on CJ's team. Really your best way to take care of like that Elekid. Something like that could be a very heat set that I would be super excited to see. I think Trico probably not the best grass type in this matchup. I mean, you have the Snivy that does a lot of work, but I think Choice Scarf Gullet looks really good here. It is a little bit unfortunate locking into a move like Earthquake or Poltergeist when they do have the Rufflet that can come in for free afterwards. So you do have to worry about that just a little bit. I mean, it is definitely a big worry, but it is important to get rid of something like the Elekid. I also could see this thing just be more defensive and go for like Stealth Rocks. You need to make sure that you have some sort of coverage for the Rufflet, or you just, you know, catch it on the switch and you click Stone Edge with a no guard. You're always hitting that thing, and it should just be able to one-shot with a nice attack stat off of Gullet. You know, I feel like you just bring those top four, or, you know, it's the top 5 minus Trico. You have other options for what you want to bring. I think Alolan Meowth is great here for its natural speed, and being able to click like Technician Fake Out versus CJ's team is really nice. And it's kind of, you know, up in the air between what do you want to bring Froakie? Do you want to have that Protean option? Do you want like a nice, real strong Scarfer in this matchup? Being able to punish stuff like Sawaddle. I also think that Fletchling does kind of the same thing with the Gale Wings, being able to punish Sawaddle a ton. And, you know, even having some niche defensive merit here, being able to kind of switch into the, you know, Earthquakes that kind of are really strong versus you from their Sandshrew. You could also run Dreepy or Terra Captain here. You have a lot of options for what you want to Terra into. But I think even like staying Ghost or going Dragon is really solid. I don't think the Flabebe is very strong in this matchup on CJ's side. So if you go Dragon, I mean, you just drop Terra Dragon boosted Draco Meteors, essentially gives CJ some opportunity for setup, but also just claims a kill every single time it comes in. Being faster than most of CJ's team can be really, really strong. I do think that CJ has the slight edge in this game. I think Rufflet is going to be a little bit too hard for Alistar to take care of. But if they let, you know, Snivy go It's going to be really hard. Also, if you let all those hazards get up, Stealth Rock from the Dunsparce or the Gullet. You also have Spikes or T-Spikes from the Froakie that can be really solid here. I think it's going to be really hard for CJ to be able to win that matchup, but I do think I'll give the slight edge to CJ in a really strong matchup this week, one that I am incredibly excited to watch. If you guys are excited to watch this too, be sure to check out all the channels that should be linked in the description. I know CJ's video went up for week 1. A couple of other people already uploaded theirs. So I'm excited to see everything that comes in this second week. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the draft notes for LPDL season 2. I'm excited to keep this going. Seems like you guys enjoy me looking through all the matchups, and you know, it's nice for me to be able to learn a lot more about LiliPup. I'm not like claiming